What's going on, guys? Welcome to not just another episode of Ralph's Real Review, but a great episode of Ralph's Real Review, where today we are going over The Great Mouse Detective, and I make the case for why this may be one of Disney's most underrated movies. However, before I do that, I do have to point out that this video is set to release on December 23rd. As of this moment, I am just 3 subscribers short of my very modest goal of 50 subs, and I can't think of a greater gift than for you to join and help grow our community. So if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you can follow this series throughout 2025, as well as get updated on new movie reviews. It looks like my first review of 2025 will be One of Them Days, the movie starring Keke Palmer and SZA. And then I'm also going to review Wolfman. I'm not a big horror guy, but that one seems like it might be enough for me to handle. But enough of the promo, let's review The Great Mouse Detective. The Great Mouse Detective opens with a young mouse named Olivia. She's chilling at home with her father, who is a toy maker, when he gets kidnapped by a bat named Fidget, who works for Professor Ratigan. Olivia, in an attempt to save her father, begins to look for the Great Mouse Detective, who is known by them as Basil of Baker Street. She gets lost. She runs into Dr. Dawson, who accompanies her to Baker Street, where Basil is already on the hunt for Professor Ratigan, who is his intellectual equal. And now that all 3 of their paths align, they are off to find the toy maker and defeat Professor Ratigan. I actually had a lot of fun with this movie because I'm getting to the point in these reviews where I really have to split hairs and look at moments versus the entirety of a movie and how I'm going to weigh that. The animation department of The Great Mouse Detective is a huge sign of that, because the truth is, for the majority of this movie, it looked like The Rescuers, which I have dead last on this list. There's a lack of bright colors, a lot of dull backgrounds, so how did it get into the top 5 when it so closely resembled a movie that I currently have in 26th place out of 26 movies? The answer is the bell scene. The bell scene for this movie was everything. So if you don't know, this was not the first time Disney used CGI in film, but this is the first time that they used it this extensively. And it was the first time that they had traditionally drawn and animated characters on a full CGI background. And it really pops. To a casual viewer today, it might just look unique, but when going through and comparing it in order, we can't deny what it was up until this point in history. And then this puberty era where we've seen a lot of Disney being different, but not knowing if it was good different or not. This was good different. It really felt like Disney took a leap forward animation-wise. In addition, comparing the two, The Rescuers didn't have a lot of fun locations in that movie. You know, you were at a swamp, you were at an orphanage. The Great Mouse Detective, while still kind of bleak overall with the colors, I did feel that they had some fun places to go to, right? So Basil is in Sherlock Holmes' house. They go to a toy store, they go to a bar. Ratigan's lair itself is kind of bright on the inside. And then finally, that climactic battle takes place in Big Ben. So there's a lot going on in this movie in the animation department. I did consider putting it behind Cinderella and Alice in Wonderland, but ultimately I had it land at 5th. At storytelling, I have The Great Mouse Detective at 5th again, and it's not really because I feel this is a top 5 plot, but more so because I feel that it does a great job, in my opinion, of trimming the fat and giving us a straightforward story. The runtime is about 74 minutes, which according to drdisney.com, that is the shortest runtime since Cinderella, which was also 74 minutes. And you could argue Winnie the Pooh is also 74 minutes, but to me, that's a collection of shorts, not so much a movie. So to me, this is the shortest real Disney movie since Cinderella. And to me, a good way to measure if that matters or not is, did you leave the audience wanting more? I think if you're sitting and you're waiting for a movie to be over, then it's probably too long and you have some fat in there. If you leave wanting more, though, then a plot was engaging enough, A, and B, obviously they didn't put too much in because you wanted more. And to me, that's really the great tragedy of this movie, is we never got more. But I'm going to touch on that more in the tier section of this video. Stick around for that. We have an incredibly efficient movie. I like how it opens straight away with some action. We're introduced to Basil immediately, with him showing off his detective skills before the antagonist is officially introduced. Like, the beats are all there. They're exactly where they should be. There's no fat. I think the plots for the movies above it are somewhat stronger, and they also don't have too much filler. So that's the one weakness of this movie, but overall it's very solid. In the character department, I have The Great Mouse Detective at 13th out of 26, so definitely the definition of mid. I do think that Fidget is a much more realized version of the Creeper from The Black Cauldron. But overall, all the other characters like fit their roles, right? Olivia plays like Penny from The Rescuers. Dawson is a good sidekick. The toy maker is a concerned father. Like, everyone plays their roles well, but there's nothing too spectacular with the side cast. I really love the two main characters in this movie being Basil and Radigan, and I think Disney made a huge mistake of letting this property die with this movie. I think I have to put Basil and Radigan at 13th, despite the fact that they are really great characters, because of the fact simply that this is all we got. We got this hour and 15 minutes with them, and that's it. If given more time, like many of the other characters above them, I do believe Basil and Radigan would be more popular, but because the movies released when they did and the success that came after these movies, I think Disney really dropped the ball here. Full of potential, but not enough time. 13th for Basil and Radigan. For the Disney factor, I have The Great Mouse Detective at 14th, and it's in a weird space of me wanting to put it higher, but also looking at the fact that it could go lower as well. So let's start with the cons. The cons here were the cons for a lot of Disney movies before the Renaissance, right? So you have a questionable stereotype that's never really explained as to why they did it. You got people or mice, I guess, drugging drinks and getting drunk, and you got them smoking, and you do have a straight up mouse execution as well as a lot of gunplay. So I'm not saying that these things are too much for kids, by the way. I'm saying that they were things that we no longer consider part of the Disney brand today, although they were pretty prevalent in the first half of Disney's filmography. The pros here are that you can argue that the Renaissance really begins here as you start to melt the puberty era. I'm going to try to make that a thing with the Renaissance, right? It feels like the new team had been trying and tinkering and trying to make all these things, and this is where it finally clicked. We have a villain song that is perfectly placed. We have a charismatic protagonist. We have the cute animals and the cute kids. Like, it's all here, minus the stellar animation, but even then we have some ingenuity. Like, this felt like a movie that if we just swapped when it was released, we would say it's a Renaissance film. Like, if we took The Rescuers Down Under and had to come out in 1986 and we had this movie come out in 1990, it would feel right in place. So for those reasons, weighing out the pros and the cons, it lands at 14th. For music, I have The Great Mouse Detective right outside the top 10 at 11, and that's mostly because of Radigan's villain song. There's not much in this movie according to Wikipedia. There's 3 songs here. I only remember 2. While clearly 2 of the 3 songs were forgettable, I don't think they were forced, which is good. They felt like they belonged in their scenes, of course, minus the one song that I can't even remember. However, The World's Greatest Criminal Mind is a perfect introduction to Radigan, and again, it's like a predecessor to what it looks like for Disney music to be at its best. So peak Disney music really has to clear 3 bars for me, right? First and primarily, I would say it has to actually serve the movie in some way. It has to let us know a character or focus on a plot point. To me, looking at songs like How Far I'll Go or Go the Distance, they're great examples of this, right? We get insight into these characters, into their desires because of the fact that these songs exist, right? So the next bar is replayability. And as much as I don't like to admit it, the truth is being culturally relevant matters in the entertainment industry. And what's the point of making the greatest song if nobody sings it, right? Can you claim for something to be the greatest song if nobody knows it? So with Disney songs in particular, how catchy are you and how much are you in the mainstream, right? Finally, the third most important for me is, of course, how technically sound are you? And this is where Lin-Manuel Miranda has been killing it for the Disney company in modern times. He just makes such technically sound and great music, but we've already gone too far on this tangent, right? The point being are that there are these bars in this category. They're going to be critical as we enter the Renaissance, and Radigan's song only clears one of these 3 bars. However, I would argue that it doesn't just meet the standard, but it heavily reinforces a bar that was created by 101 Dalmatians with Cruella de Vil, right? Villain songs are their own faction of Disney music, and this song is the perfect introduction to our villain. Cruella, while legendary and setting that bar as the OG villain song, in my opinion, was a bit forward and on the nose, right? This song makes it clear that while physically imposing, Radigan's threat is his criminal mind, right? It also shows how much he hates being called a rat, and the extent of his evil, right? As he literally feeds his henchman to a cat for calling him a rat while he was drunk, shows absolutely no remorse, and he even threatens to kill the rest of his crew if they don't continue to sing. So yeah, I think this song is an important part in Disney history. I think none of the songs feel forced in this movie, and there's only 3, so that's why it's ranking here. For box office success, The Great Mouse Detective comes in at 15th with a little under $111.3 million adjusted for inflation. This is low compared to movies that came out before, but honestly, it was huge compared to the movie that came out directly before it with The Black Cauldron, almost doubling its return adjusted for inflation. So this movie was very important to the company box office wise, so much so that I'm going to give it a bump over The Sword and the Stone, which did outgross it by about $40 million adjusted. That's because the animation department at this time was in flux when it comes to the Disney company, right? When you look at the top 10 so far in the box office returns, you'll notice that all these movies are at about 500 million adjusted for inflation, and then there's a steep drop off with the rest of these movies. The last Disney movie to make that much money was The Jungle Book in 1967, which Walt had worked on. Wolfgang Reitherman had director credits on 3 of the top 5 Disney grosses up until this point, and now he's gone, and The Black Cauldron just bombed at a massive level at about 60 million. Eisner is being introduced to the company at this time. He slashes the budget for this movie and is still performed at a respectable level, which convinced the higher-ups that the animation department still had some juice, and thank God they continued to believe, because we were just 2 years away from the movie that would change everything for Walt Disney Animation. Finally, in terms of historical significance, I have this movie at 4, and it's tough because you could argue it should be much lower given how the company hasn't leaned into it too much. I hear that, and I understand the argument completely. I can't even bring myself to say that it's wrong. However, I blame Disney for that. As you can argue, it is probably their most underrated and underappreciated property. I'm not going to relist the reasons why it's historically significant. I've done that for this entire video. Such a long video. All right. The music, the animation, the Big Ben scene, the importance of its box office success, Radigan's song, all of these elements are so under the radar important, and I don't want to overlook that because Disney decided to make The Rescuers Down Under instead of The Great Mouse Detective 2, Radigan's Return. Hire me. That will lead me perfectly into my tier ranking, and this was so freaking impossible for me to do. I have to make sure I'm not letting my feeling that this is potentially the most underrated Disney movie make me shoot over the moon and say that it's the best up until this point. It's not, and truthfully, it's not even close. That alone allows us to take off the skippable and every categories. The diehards truthfully will love this movie for all the reasons I said above, but I don't think they're the only ones who will love this movie, so that category is gone too, which leaves us with movie fans and Disney fans, right? In my mind, to make the everyone category, you need to be almost unimpeachable, like you're just a great movie, anyone can turn on and enjoy, no questions asked, right? For movie fans, you have to be a good movie. If you're closer to a fine movie, you have to have characters that are well known by the masses, which this movie does not have. And when I'm having a hard time really choosing between movie fans and Disney fans, I ask, what if I recommended this movie to my mom, right? What would she say? What would her feedback be? And I'm pretty sure my mom would say it's a fine movie, but she wouldn't feel the need to really watch it again. And I don't think she'd be alone in thinking that way. So while I want to put this movie in the movie fan tier, I have to place it at the top of the Disney fan tier. The truth is, this is a good movie, but not a great movie. It's exciting seeing it from my perspective in this exercise because I'm seeing the puzzle pieces coming together and really clicking for the first time. I've seen the pieces in the last couple of movies, but they weren't clicking with me. However, on its own merits, let's look at this movie. It does have flaws. You have 2 main characters that are a lot of fun, but the rest of them are pretty forgettable, right? There is one good song, and while it's great from like a purpose standpoint, it didn't meet the other 2 bars of great Disney songs. The animation is groundbreaking, but overall, it's a little bit bleak. And I have to say, I love this movie. I would tell any Disney fan you have to watch this movie. I would encourage everyone to watch this movie, especially movie fans, but I wouldn't recommend it, or I would recommend it with hesitations, which if that's not solid reasoning for a movie to be right on the cusp of these 2 tiers, then I don't know what is. That's going to do it for today's episode, guys. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and hit the bell so you can get notified for every review. We're continuing this series. It's going to last throughout 2025 and culminate in 2026. And then we're making new movie reviews, starting with One of Them Days and Wolfman. I will say, again, I don't do a lot of horror reviews, so for me to watch a horror movie and review it, you're going to want to, take notice of that because it's not going to happen often. Also, guys, with Christmas coming up, getting these subs and followers would make me so happy. So if you could, follow me on TikTok at Ralph's Rapid Review. We're about 12 followers away from our goal there. And if you could follow me on Instagram at Ralph's Review, that would be great. And then also, guys, hit up these comments. Let me know, what do you think of The Great Mouse Detective? Have you seen it? Will you see it? Am I too high? Am I too low? I actually feel really good about how this one played out. But stay tuned for the rapid review dropping here on Wednesday, drops on TikTok on Tuesday, and then join us next week as we review Oliver and Company. Bye, guys.